What's up, guys? Robert Rule of Two Review here, and today is your Tomb Raider better than my Tomb Raider? So this is another fairly random controversy coming out over the last few days, and I guess controversy is the best word I could use to describe it. To be fair, it's a word I'm actually borrowing from some other gaming sites relating to this news story. To me, it's not the most controversial thing in the world, but I do recognize that these things are, I'm kind of lamenting this fact, becoming more and more important with this, next generation as we move forward with it. And really, it's kind of been a problem the last few years overall. So what am I talking about? It is the fact that apparently it was recently revealed via a gameplay demonstration of the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition that was showcasing specifically the PS4 version. And it was then confirmed by one of the developers that was actually showing off the game that the PlayStation 4 version will run in 60 frames per second. I believe it was also through that confirmed that the Xbox One version will not be 60 frames per second. And so that's kind of the big hubbub is, similar to the whole pre-launch issue of Call of Duty Ghosts being known to run at native 1080p on the PlayStation 4, and then it was going to be an upscaled 1080p on the Xbox One, or a 720, I believe. Basically, it wasn't running at full actual native 1080p on the Xbox One. And man, what a shitstorm of controversy and chaos that really brought forth, because we just live in this graphic-centric world, and especially with the next generation of consoles and the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One specifically, because they do have a little bit of a jump on the Wii U's power as well. And people really focus on that. And we always have. That's the thing as far as gamers in the gaming industry, and I'm certainly guilty of it in the past and even sometimes today too, of really caring about good graphics, sometimes more than needs to be. And this is really kind of indicative of that sort of issue and the fact that people are kind of blowing this out of proportion. But at the same time, there is a little bit of validity and importance to this that I do want to touch on. So in many ways, it would almost be fair to really say that the frame rate doesn't qualify as the graphic fidelity, the graphic prowess, or, the actual visual clarity of what you're looking at. It's more about how the game feels. And in most ways, I actually do agree with that. For example, my favorite game of all time, which I've talked about many times, is Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime in 2002, by the way, was very famous for being one of the very first games to run completely at 60 frames per second. And that game very much at the time had this ahead of its time feel. That was kind of the way it was really spoken about, thought about, and remembered, is that game felt like it was ahead of its time. Everything you were doing, playing, seeing, and hearing was from the future. It was from 5 or 6 years down the road. It just looked so great and played so great, and the story was so cool, and everything about it. I mean, there's a reason that it's my favorite game of all time, so I will not sit here and gush about it. But one of the things that lent to that experience was that 60 frames per second feeling. It really does make a game look and feel better. So I don't want to take anything away from that. That's kind of the interesting part to the interesting side to this scenario right here, is that one version apparently is 60, the other one is 30. When you do think about Metroid Prime in 2002, I think it is still a little bit different of a case in the sense that at the time, it was so new and so rare. New in the sense that it wasn't really something that a lot of people at the time were really thinking of. It wasn't how we were analyzing graphics and the the power capabilities of systems at the time, which was the GameCube, PlayStation 4, GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox. I'm so used to saying PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and 360. I'm losing my mind, you guys. Anyway, GameCube, PS2, Xbox. So at that time, we weren't really thinking about that kind of stuff. So really, the FPS, frames per second conversation, really is something that has garnered steam over the last decade. And, it's only picked up more and more steam as it's gotten more common and more important in gaming. So when we come to present day today, 2014, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Wii U generation, that is a pretty big deal. The Wii U, for example, has a lot of games coming out that are going to be running at 60 frames per second. Nintendo, not too long ago, was very boastful of this, and I think it is a pretty big deal. They have a lot of 1080p and 60 frames per second games coming out. Mario Kart's one of the big ones we know. I believe also Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, Bayonetta 2, I think all those games are within that realm, and who knows what else. So, that's a big deal, and that's really exciting, and it is something to be boastful of. So now here we are in present day, Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, and I'm going to get to my feelings on that in a moment. Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, the up-resed, upscaled version of Tomb Raider, last year's Tomb Raider, which I named as my 8th favorite game of the year, by the way, is now coming out in the next month, I believe, for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One. And what does this, I guess this is kind of, the point of this is, what does it mean that one version is 60 frames per second and the other one is not? Well, I think it really means two things. On one hand, it kind of does matter a lot. Basically, everything I just spent the last few minutes talking about when comparing my Metroid Prime experience to this is that 60 frames per second really can make a difference. I myself am a huge Call of Duty player. You're obviously watching some Call of Duty Ghosts footage right now. And as a Call of Duty player, one of the things I've always appreciated is how, Infinity Ward and Treyarch, Activision basically, has always been very vocal and proud of that one hallmark of the Call of Duty series, that kind of staple of those games, which is that they run in 60 frames per second. It's part of what makes those games feel good. And that is the distinction. They feel good. Those games don't really look good. They don't look bad by any stretch, but they've never been, I think since probably Modern Warfare 2, that was the only time I remember thinking, man, these Call of Duty games look amazing. Modern Warfare 1 and 2. Since then, the visual and graphical comparison of Call of Duty games to other games really kind of started to go away. They're not known for blowing your balls off with amazing visuals. However, the purity and the smoothness and the way that those games feel because they play in 60 frames per second is part of their charm. It's part of their success. I should say, the success of their formula. I can definitely say that as an avid Call of Duty player, that it's one of my favorite things about those games. And, when I really dissect why I love them and I can play them over and over again, and even though a lot of people make fun of the series, I still love it and buy it every year, is when dissecting it, I realize that 60 frames per second does make it more fun to play compared to other competitive shooters, for me. And for a lot of people. So that is part of that conversation about the frames per second. It does feel better. It doesn't necessarily look better. Sometimes, yes, but ultimately it comes down to feel. And so the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, that is probably going to feel better on the PlayStation 4 because the Xbox One version is going to be at 30 frames per second only. And of course, the other side of the coin is that it kind of really doesn't matter too much at the end of the day. And here's why. 30 frames per second is standard. If it stays at 30 frames per second, doesn't dip below it too often, and maintains a healthy running pace and just a smooth feel overall to the game, even if it doesn't feel 60 frames per second like the PlayStation 4 version will, I'm pretty sure it's still going to feel like the same great game as it did before. I don't think that... and even further to the point, Tomb Raider specifically, I don't think necessarily needs or would benefit too much from 60 frames per second. The caveat here is, before anyone jumps down my throat, the caveat is that I have not played this version. I have not played comparatively the 30 frames per second version to the 60 frames per second version. Obviously, I know that there will be a difference, but if it would actually affect how good the game is overall, I can't say because I haven't played them. However, my gut feeling is that it probably won't make too big of a difference. And that, again, is really specifically because it is this Tomb Raider game. I feel like with Call of Duty, it makes a big difference. With Mario Kart 8 coming out, which we know will be 60 frames per second, that is probably going to make a difference because of that kind of game. Those two games are very fast-paced, twitch reflex kinds of games, and I think that that's going to lend to their visual experience and to the fluidity and comfort and the ease of play with those games. Tomb Raider being a third-person action-adventure exploring game, while it's always nice to have, I don't think it's going to necessarily be the biggest definer as what game is better or not. However, we know that the conversation is going to continue and exist, especially amongst gamers and the fanboys of their respective systems, that PlayStation 4 version is better, Xbox One version sucks more, PlayStation 4 is a better system overall simply because of this one fact at Tomb Raider, and the Xbox One sucks so much more simply because of this one fact of Tomb Raider. That's how the internet is going to spin the conversation. It's kind of a shame because I don't necessarily think it needs to go that way, but we're all used to it. We know what to expect. So that aside, I don't think it's really going to be that big of a deal. And it's interesting in the sense that, the other thing is my feeling, I guess, on this definitive edition. When I first heard about it, as someone who played and completed and loved the first Tomb Raider, obviously as evidenced by my top 10 games of 2013, at first I think I was kind of excited because I was like, oh, well, I just really loved that game. And I'm really excited to finally get, one of the other systems now. I need to still get both an Xbox One and a PlayStation 4. And since I loved that game and they're going to change it and make it a little bit better, maybe it would be worth it to play it. So that was really exciting, and to think about it looking a little bit better, even though that game looked pretty darn good overall as is. On the last gen version, I played it on the PS3 personally. So I was excited at first, and then I saw some of it and it looks okay. I mean, it does look a little bit better than it did before. I haven't had a chance to experience or view much of the 60 frames per second PlayStation 4 version yet. But as far as what I have seen, it just looked a little bit better, a little bit clearer. I've seen some comparison videos and it looks just, I don't even know what else to say. It looks a little bit better. So right off the bat, the whole graphical upgrade didn't really seem to make much of a difference. And I don't usually love that stuff, but sometimes it works really well. Obviously, the Wind Waker HD was just amazing, you know, even visually, beyond just having that game come out again and be better than it was. I definitely say that the improved graphics on that, it's one of the best looking games I've ever seen. And it's only an HD upgrade of a 10-year-old game. And that made a difference, the fact that it looked so good. So, you know, if they make this Tomb Raider version and the graphical difference really does feel that significant, then I would certainly appreciate that, and I would be glad that it looks better. However, what I've seen so far hasn't been too impressive, and also, and you guys can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, I've done only so much research and seen only so many videos, but I don't think much of the content changed. And I gotta tell you, if not a lot of the content changed and they just gave it barely a graphical overhaul, it's like, come on, what's the point of, everyone wants to talk about the power of the next generation. I mean, what's going on here? If it barely looks better and there's not a lot of extra content, I kind of care even less. I basically kind of don't care at all. And what I do understand is that it's kind of something, it's a bone they're throwing in the, you know, the beginning life cycle of these new systems. You know, the Wii U had a few things just like the HD up. That was another one, the HD upgrade of Monster Hunter 3, which was fantastic for the Wii U. Looked amazing, but that was a game where they changed and added a lot and made it better enough to warrant it existing, just like with the Wind Waker. The Wii U is kind of a special case, and it's sort of unfair to the other two next-gen consoles because the difference is when people adapt games for the Wii U, they have the marvelous advantage of that wonderful controller, and that changes everything. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One regrettably don't have those kinds of game changers when it comes. They literally have nothing to rely on but a little bit more power and better graphics, which is fine, doesn't always make a difference. So when you're doing these things, they're doing this Tomb Raider thing, it's got a slightly better coat, but not very significant. Add some other stuff, make it more appealing. I mean, if they made it appealing enough, I would have plunked down another $60 for this game when I get whatever system I get in by March, because March is when I'm going to get the first of those two, and I'm debating every day. It's like I'm on a different side. Do I want the Xbox? What do I want the PlayStation 4? I don't know. But so, you know, you need to add more to it. Do what Nintendo and Capcom did with those two games, and you should be doing the same here with the with Tomb Raider. And hopefully there are more differences and added features that maybe I'm just not aware of, or that they just haven't talked about yet. If that's the case, awesome, good on them. Part of the reason for this existing, of course, I think I got on a tangent there. Part of the reason for this to exist is to also excite and entice players who might not have played it previously to play it now that they might have decided to get a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and they're looking for games to play. If you have one of those two systems and you didn't play it last generation, please pick it up. Regardless of the fact that I said I'm not that excited for it, at the end of the day, the game itself, no matter how you're playing it, what system you're playing it on, any of those things, it's awesome. So if it's your first time, you need to buy it. I definitely all but demand that you buy and play this game because it kicks major ass. So I guess that's kind of my ultimate feelings on this, guys. You know, I'm sad that this is turning into and going to continue to turn into this whole battle of the consoles thing just because of this. And while I do think it's kind of silly and regrettable that I guess if the PlayStation 4 could make it at 60 frames per second, that the Xbox One couldn't, I would think that that's possible, but whatever reason, that seems to be the case. One of the quotes, I did not pull up any of the articles and stuff in front of me, guys, which I normally do, so I'm sorry. I do not have the exact quote in front of me, and I don't want to take the time to do it now while I'm recording. But the quote that I heard from one of the publishers of the game mentioned that, you know, I'm going to way paraphrase here. He basically said, you know, shooting for a smooth running game at 30 frames per second was always their goal. It's the most optimal and perfect way to play the game, and it's going to keep it running and feeling smooth and fresh. Anything beyond that, i.e. 60 frames per second, is basically icing on the cake. It's extra gravy. You know, they've already achieved their goal that's going to make the game as awesome as it needs to be at 30 frames per second, you know, which is what the Xbox One version has to do. There happens to be a little bit more of an icing on the cake scenario with the PlayStation 4 version. However, there's no reason to look down on the Xbox One version and an only 30 frames per second version of the game. I'm going to go ahead and back that. I think that's the purpose overall that I was getting with this and sharing my feelings. I think that that's a completely legitimate, viable statement. I agree with that, man. The game is going to rock at 30 frames per second on the Xbox One, because to me, it rocked at 30 frames per second on the PlayStation 3, even though it kind of frame rate dipped a lot. When it was running smooth at 30, I fucking loved it. It's a great game. Had a lot of fun playing it. So Guys, don't turn this into any more of a battle than it has to be. Both of the systems are great in their own way. This game is really a great game, so let's just be excited that it's being, made available for more people to play. Yes, it's kind of a money grab, but what the hell are you going to do? We live in that world. If the game is good, that's all that matters at the end of the day. I don't mind people trying to make money if they're releasing good product while doing it. It's fine with me. That's why we usually throw our money at these people anyway. PlayStation 4, Xbox One, they're two really good systems. They've got their own benefits. They're both very powerful. Who gives a fuck if one is a little bit better than the other? We're over this, man. We got 3 different kick-ass systems right now that all do different things. Just accept them for what they are, I feel like I'm always defending this topic on all my videos lately. I don't know why. It just seems to keep coming up. So I don't want to get too kind of, Zen-like and philosophical and hippie-like on this, Just don't fight. Don't fight, you guys. It's good stuff, good systems. It's going to be a great game. So at the end of the day, 30 frames, 60 frames, doesn't really matter because Tomb Raider just kicks major ass and you need to play it. Alrighty, guys, that's it for today. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what I'm doing and talking about them, please subscribe to the channel, Rule of Two Review. I have a link to the Facebook page in the description below, so please go ahead and click that link and like the Facebook page because I like to leave fun updates and I post the videos and stuff up there. So I'm trying to build my little empire. So the more people like on the Facebook page, the more fun it is for me and us, when I start to get more people involved with the channel. It's been a while since I've had some people on, so I'll be doing that again soon. You of course, can find us on Twitter at Rule of Two Review. Please like the video if you liked it, share it with your friends if you liked it, leave any comments and thoughts below. I always love feedback. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.